Fashion is a crucial part of world history. It's used for demonstrating religious beliefs, protesting politics, and self-expression. In the United States, women's fashion changed greatly in the 20th century due to big and important events, specifically World War II, feminism, and the Civil Rights Movement. This progression of styles and clothing gave women more independence and rights, as well as weakened the patriarchy in the U.S.
So my name is Andrew Hoagie, and I am the Style and Society writer at Seattle Magazine. I've been working in the fashion industry for about 10 years now. I started out in fashion PR. I worked for Lila Couture, who is a local fashion designer in Seattle, and also did a couple internships, including with Oscar de la Renta out in New York. So I sort of got my bearings, did a couple internships, and then worked my way up with Luli to manage her fashion shows, social media, her public relations, and her marketing. And eventually I started my own blog, which landed me here at Seattle Magazine. I grew up in Yakima, Washington. Not that it has anything to do with it, but I was not raised around fashion or anything like that. I really became interested in fashion in the latter part of high school when I started actually doing musicals and getting a little bit more involved with the community and learning about myself. And through a couple of different experiences, I came to realize that fashion was an opportunity and a tool for empowerment, and that's sort of the route that I took, and that's what got me hooked. I think that one of my favorite trends that I've seen over the last 100 years or so has been the refinement of tailoring. People have become more conscious of the body, which I think is very, very important. You know, way back when, it was more about sort of a look, and not everybody had access to the clothes that in the way that we do now. So as we've come along, you know, paying attention to different body types, heights, silhouettes, things like that, have been able to empower people and give people an opportunity to wear something that is truly meant for them without having to make it custom. So I think that's really, really exciting, and that's sort of an overall trend that continues to develop over year to year. Well, I think that overall fashion has become more democratized over the 20th century. It is less of a symbol of class or status, although some of those elements still exist, of course, but it's more about expressing yourself, and it's more of an art form than it was at the beginning of the century. You know, World War II, as we all know, impacted a lot of different industries, specifically for fashion. Of course, you can't make clothes without fabric, and during World War II, fabric was highly, highly rationed. You know, before there were a lot of, and generally speaking, there were a lot of ruffles, and dresses were bigger, and there were many layers and things like that. And World War II really rationed fashion so that things became slimmer. New types of fabrics were used. Rayon was a huge fabric that was brought into sort of the industry to make different blends and new types of fabric and things of that nature. I think that World War II also saw Paris losing its kind of its crown as being the leader of the fashion industry worldwide. Some of the houses closed, like Chanel temporarily closed her atelier for a time during World War II, and it lost that sort of illustrious leadership that it had retained for so long. And so World War II also saw American fashion rise and sort of the American style come into prominence. Yeah, so I think that the feminist movement was all about rebellion, and I think that this was a time when fashion was used to express that. So one of the examples that I give is miniskirts, right? The headlines just kept going up and up and up, and it was meant as a way to visually show what everyone was feeling. The civil rights movement, fashion was a form of protest, for sure. Men and women were wearing slimmer silhouettes. Denim was becoming a huge trend, and everything was just going a little bit more casual. Within the fashion sphere, there were a lot of prints, especially African prints, that were introduced as a form of protest as well. That just became a little bit more mainstream along the way. Yeah, well, there's generally this rule of every 30 to 40 years, fashion sort of recycles itself, and the trends that were popular back then come into prominence. One of the examples is the 90s is back. You know, you have all of your denim, your leather jackets, your flannel, but it's just a little bit different. The color choices are different, the silhouette choices are different. It just is refined ever so slightly to exist for this time. But there are exceptions to the rule. For example, the prairie dress, which was huge last year, is something that was alive and well in the 20s and the early part of the century. So there are definitely parallels, and every 30 to 40 years they get refined ever so slightly.
Over the course of the 1900s, many key events happened, affecting many parts of American culture, especially fashion. Women gained a lot of independence during this long time period. As we look back on these fast changes in history, all we can do is wonder what the future holds and hope we've learned from our downfalls and can grow from our gains.